Hello everyone and welcome to Rebekah's Reading Corner. Today is January 2nd, so a happy new year to everybody. Also, some little news you can see in my hand here. I got a microphone for Christmas, so the audio quality of my videos should improve, which is awesome. But to get into today's video, I'm gonna do a challenge for myself to see how many books I can read in the month of January. I did one back in June, I think 2 years ago, for a reading program. I'm not doing a reading program right now, but I kind of have a month off from work currently, so I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to try this challenge again and see how many books I can read in a month. Like before, I'm going to talk to you when I finish a book and give you kind of a little mini review of each one. So let's get right into it. So today is January 5th, and I've officially finished the first book of January. And a slight disclaimer with this one, I did start reading it before January started. However, the majority of it was in the month of January, so I'm going to count it. So I hope that's okay and you can forgive me. But the first book I have here is Slightly Sinful by Mary Balog. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that last name, so I apologize. And a little thing with this book, I started reading it because I got a bookshelf on Facebook Marketplace. You can actually see it in the background there. It's really nice. But it had some books that came in it, and this was one of them. So I read this one not knowing at first that it was part of a series and like smack dab in the middle of that series. But thankfully it's kind of like Bridgerton, where each book focuses on a different family member. And so it kind of was able to be its own kind of little standalone thing, and I wasn't feeling super like lost or confused or anything. And the plot of this one actually lends itself really well to being a standalone too. So let's just get into a quick little summary of that. It starts with this guy named, I think his name is Aelin, and he is a courier in the middle of a war. And so he is trying to deliver a letter to someone on the front lines. He gets shot on his way out and falls off his horse and like gets a really bad concussion and everything. And he is found by this lady named Rachel. He's like on the verge of death, and she brings him back to a brothel where she's staying with 4 ladies, and she's staying there. I'm trying to explain this as precisely as possible, but she's staying with them because previously she met a man who claimed to be a clergyman and was collecting donations for a charity, but he was actually like a scammer. And she introduced these ladies, these brothel ladies, to him, and he took their money, and they all believed him. But then Rachel discovered that he was actually lying and a scammer, and so she ran back and told the ladies what had happened. So they planned to get their money back from this guy. But first, they had to get some money to leave Brussels, where their brothel is, so that they could go and chase this guy down. They bring Aelin and one other guy back to the brothel. They kind of heal up for a little while. They devise a plan on how to get money. Rachel has a rich uncle who has some jewels that she's supposed to inherit, but he keeps holding them from her until either she's married or she's 25. Aelin, who is recovering from his wounds, cannot remember anything. Like, he has amnesia from his injuries. So he suggests a plan of he will pretend to be her husband so that she can get her jewels, and then they can chase down this guy who stole all their money. I don't want to spoil too much, but it follows a pretty, stereotypical romance book. I mean, they fall in love in the end and they get married for real. So I'm sorry that's a spoiler, but I mean, I think you could see that coming. Overall, I would say I give this book a 3 out of 5. It's well written. The characters are pretty well developed. I will say, though, that the first half of the book is just Aylin's in bed and he's healing from his injuries. So there's not a whole lot of action that happens until like the very end of the book. I was a little bored at some points. However, I think overall it's a decent story, and so that's why it gets kind of a middle of the road rating for me. Today is January 9th, and I just finished Moist Sand and Gravel by Paul Muldoon. And this is actually a poetry book. I wanted to kind of switch it up, and I was really feeling poetry. Of course, you know, poetry doesn't really have any rules, but to me, some of these felt more like short stories than poems. Now, as a collection of short stories, it's really good. And I guess I just had expectations that weren't really met. And I know that's more of a problem on my end. But there was one poem in particular that really stuck out to me, and I'm gonna read you a little excerpt from it, actually, to get a little taste. This is my favorite lines of the whole book. Is from the poem The Breather. Think of this gravestone as long... I already messed it up. Think of this gravestone as a long, low chair, strategically placed at the turn in the stair. I'll let you ruminate on that one. This book actually has a Pulitzer Prize, so that's pretty cool. I think that's the first book I've ever read that actually has that. But yeah, overall, I would say it was kind of middle of the road for me, which would give it a 3. But because that one poem really did stand out to me, it gets it an extra half star. So in total, this one gets a 3.5. Today is the 11th, and I'm sitting on the floor by my Christmas tree because over here is where I have the best lighting currently. But onto the book that I just finished. I continued with the poetry theme, and I finally read Milk and Honey by Rebekah. I've had this one on my shelf for a really long time. I know it's a controversial book in the poetry world. I can understand where everyone is coming from. A lot of these poems are incredibly short, like 2 lines even, and they feel more like statements instead of poems. However, I will give the author some credit. Every once in a while, she does have some good lines in there that do stick out. You can see I've highlighted some stuff in there. So there is some decent things in there. I think the main thing that's kind of hurting her poems is her lack of imagery. I actually took a poetry class in my last semester. Funnily enough, my professor actually told us that this is not poetry. She just straight up told me that. But I'm not going to be so harsh. I think there's lots of flexibility with poetry. But I do agree that her stuff does not feel like poetry because she has a lack of images. That's the biggest thing I learned, is that poetry is all about images. You have a statement you're trying to make, but you don't directly make that statement like you do in an essay or a novel. It's like you're saying something without outright saying it. In the poems in this book, it's a lot of literal interpretation, a lot of statements that are just statements. Every once in a while, when she does use imagery, I see the potential and I see the good stuff within that, but she just doesn't like go far enough. An example I can find of her using some decent imagery is, I think this is actually like the first poem in the whole book. Oh, the second one. Okay. And it's the very first stanza. The first boy that kissed me held my shoulders down like the handlebars of the first bicycle he ever rode. That's a decent imagery. You think about how you grip the handlebars of a bicycle and relate that to how he was holding her. But then the rest of the imagery in the poem is just kind of lacking. You know what I mean? Like, it's like surface level. I'm struggling to describe it, and I don't want this single review to take up too much time. I could like talk about poetry and stuff like forever. I just dropped the book. Oh, I put a little dent in it. Oh no. I don't do that often, I promise. Yeah, I would say overall with this book, I mean, I had an enjoyable time reading it, and I don't think it's as bad as everyone says. There are some poems that I agree are definitely pushing the edge of what is a poem, but you know, I see the potential in it. I'm not gonna rate it too harshly, but at the same time, I cannot rate it higher than the other book, the other poetry book, and actually I think I was too harsh on that one. So I'm changing that one's rank. I'm gonna add another half star to whatever my rating was for the last one. And then I think I'm gonna give this one 2.5 out of 5. I might give it a 2. Can I give it a 2.25? It's somewhere between 2 and 3 for me. So today is the 31st, the very last day of January. So a big gap, I know, but I had a pretty big book to read. So I hope you can forgive me. It's Powerless. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Let's talk about it. Firstly, I want to address the big powerless elephant in the room. I had this on my TBR, and my awesome brother got it for me for Christmas. I did not know until after that the whole Red Queen situation. And for those of you that don't know, people are saying like that Powerless is pretty much exactly like Red Queen. It's the same concept, a powerless girl in a world where everyone has like superpowers that goes to the palace, kind of falls in love with a prince, and then they kind of betray each other at the end of the book. Like, it's very, very similar, and I do see that a lot. I did read Red Queen when it came out, and I did enjoy it. And I did like this one too. So yeah, let's just talk about this book specifically outside of any Red Queen connection, and just talk about it like as it is. It was an enjoyable read. It was a fairly easy read. I do think the writing itself falls into a lot of cliche phrases, tropes. It reminds me of like how I used to write when I first started, and I actually recognized a lot of like the same habits that I used to do. And I'm not saying that this is bad writing, I'm just saying like there are moments where it kind of falls into amateur author kind of feeling. And I think this is her first book, so like that's okay. But to kind of tell you what I'm talking about, like she talks about the color of their eyes. When they first meet, there's an entire paragraph for each point of view describing the other person's eyes. Here, actually, I'll read it. I'll find it. Hold on. Just so you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Here it is. I'm going to read it dramatically for you. My eyes finally meet his. It's like looking into a storm. His eyes the color of thunderclouds setting over Ilia, of smoke puffing from the chimneys overhead, of the stolen silver coins clenched in my fist. His black long latches? Imagine your eyes closed with latches. That'd be crazy. His black long lashes are in total contrast with the steely gray eyes now sweeping across my face. Now let's see what he has to say about her eyes, shall we? Ah, it's like drowning in an ocean. Her eyes are the color of the shallow sea's deepest corner, a clear sky as it begins to drift into night, the subtle shade of a forget-me-not, and like the hottest flame, her eyes are blue and full of fire. Later in the book, they just talk about each other's eyes so much, and every character's eye color is so important. It's too important. I'm not saying you can never describe eyes in your book, but I'm just saying, like, the way in which she describes them, like, she just goes into, like, way more detail that just feels like, you know, like the stereotype that people kind of make fun of, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? I was just making fun of it, so whatever. Anyways, back to the actual review. I need to lock in here, okay? She's going for kind of like an enemies to lovers sort of thing, and it kind of works at the end, but in the beginning, I don't know. Maybe she's not trying to go for enemies to lovers. I mean, it's kind of just more like rivals to lovers. I know everyone calls rivals to lovers enemies to lovers. They're not the same. They're not the same, okay? Enemies is you hate them. You want them gone. You want them destroyed in every capacity. And that's not what this is. This is more like rivals to lovers. So if that's the vibe, that's fine. In the case of this book specifically, they like almost instantly fall in love with each other. They're pining over each other from like day one. Like there's no like slow burn at all. It's the quickest burn I've ever seen. They just pretend to dislike each other. Where I think it works is the end, where they do that whole Red Queen betrayal bit. Because then for the next book, then they are actually going to hate each other. I know I've been kind of harsh on the book, but overall, I did enjoy it. Is it a literary classic? No. But did I have a fun time? Yes. Yes, I did. It brought me back to my high school reading days. I know I've talked about this book for like way too long, so I'm just going to go ahead and give it its rating. Out of 5, I'm going to give it 3.5. I had fun. And I will be reading the next one. What am I even saying? I don't know, dude. Because it's the 31st, that concludes my reading challenge for January. So in total, I read 4 books, which I know is less than my June challenge. You know, I think it's not that bad. I'd say I enjoyed the books that I read for the most part. I know I was maybe a little harsh on my reviews for some of them, but I do like to point out critiques for things. You know, I like to be honest and thorough in my reviews. I'm very much in that mindset of critique breeds improvement. And not that these authors are going to even watch my video or anything. Paying attention to flaws in other works kind of helps you with your own work, and pointing out what works well in other books helps you with your own work too. So I think, you know, I'm a writer myself. I write some stuff, and I think reading is the best thing you can do to help your writing, you know, and just really paying attention to both the good and the bad in things. And, you know, I do want to see the positives in things. And of course, all of this is just my personal opinion. Literature is like suited to your preference, you know, not everyone's gonna like the same things. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys are all having a great new year, and I will catch you in the next one.